I just want to begin by clarifying that I've actually been playing this game in its original SNES fan-translated incarnation for over 15 years now. So not only was I playing it before it was cool, I also have some old habits kicking around that I just can't break. I still call the Amazon Lees rather than Rees, and Hawkeye is just useless guy whose primary stat wasn't coded right. So if we can put that little bit of confusion aside for the sake of this review, I think we'll get through just fine. So, let's get to it. Greetings everyone, this is the Hipster Snek, bringing today a Snek Suite, a remake of one of my favorite SNES RPGs of all time, Trials of Mana. As mentioned previously, I played Secret of Mana front to back multiple times, but it wasn't until the era of fan translations that I got to indulge in its vastly superior sequel, which I originally knew as Seiken Densetsu 3, or Legend of the Holy Sword 3. As soon as it was announced, I knew that this April 2020 remake was high on my list of games to get my hands on. And I should also make a note, this review is about the full 3D remake, not the re-release in the Collection of Mana pack. And with that out of our way, the game begins. The story opens as the forces of mana, an omnipresent and life-giving force comprised of 8 elements, is fading from the world. During this troubled time, the forces of cartoonish supervillainy begin making their moves, manipulating key figures in several of the world's 6 major civilizations, ultimately giving rise to a trio of major forces who combat both each other and the heroes for the ultimate prize, the Sword of Mana. The sword is an artifact said to grant the holder power enough to grant any desire they might have. Thus, you must assemble a team of 3 heroes of the available 6 in order to combat the encroaching threat. Plus the guidance of the opinionated fairy, we have to claim the Mana Sword before the forces of evil do. There, we begin the journey with one of 6 distinct intro segments, leading our heroes to Holy City Wendell, where their efforts begin in earnest. And for starters, this game looks fantastic. A lot of care is put into the designs to not only realize the character designs from fairly simple 16-bit sprites, but also to completely redesign map layouts to accommodate the new 3D camera, so not all the doors are facing southward, for instance. And a nice touch is that the weapons your characters wield will actually change models as you get new gear. It's a small but impressive thing that not enough RPGs do. And this next one's a bit of a personal thing, but I love the designs given to the class change outfits, and the fact that you can swap between any costume that character has worn at any time is a really cool feature. The enemies are all excellently realized as well into the 3D world, and the larger-than-life boss fights, who are already impressive in their original sprite-based incarnations, are even better portrayed in their fully rendered glory. I cannot say enough nice things about this game's amazing design, art direction, bright, colorful cast, and more. On the PC version, I did notice moments where textures took a second to pop in, but honestly, it was never particularly bad, so I didn't really mind all that much. Sound-wise, I already loved the soundtrack for this game 15 years ago, but I absolutely adore the guitar-heavy remastered soundtrack the remake sports, the high-flying battle anthems in particular being some of my favorites to hear realized with modern instrumentation. The song that plays in the Mulberry Moors is another excellent example of a song that is just amazing no matter how it's rendered. And for those of you who may not agree with me, not to worry. Under the options menu, you have the option to change it back to the original chiptune SNES score, so it's the best of both worlds whenever you want them. The sound effects are on point, closely resembling the somewhat cartoony sound effects of the original, so no complaints here. The only complaints I've ever heard were actually directed at the voice cast, and I gotta say, yeah, there are a few moments where lines are delivered kind of awkwardly. But overall, I think the voice actors actually did a pretty solid job, especially the voice actors for Kevin and Charlotte, who clearly had to deal with a lot more difficulty in their delivery than anyone else. The former speaking in a half-Hulk speak style with lots of awkward pauses in his sentences, and the latter doing her most spirited Homestar Runner impression.
My grandpa asked Heath to go to Astoria to look into something for the temple. But I got a really bad feeling about it.
And yes, it's true that some NPCs do phone their lines in, looking at you, King of Laurent, but on the whole, I actually think they did a good job with what they were given. Lee's in particular having such infectious sincerity and earnestness in every sentence that it makes her the cutest, most endearing person in the game, if we're being honest. There are 6 main characters that you can assemble your team with: Duran the Knight, Kevin the Monk, Hawk the Thief, Lise the Amazon, Angela the Black Mage, and Charlotte the White Mage. And really, there is no bad configuration. It's all going to hinge on your playstyle. Especially now that luck actually works the way it's supposed to, and it means Hawk isn't a terrible pick anymore. I even did a run with Charlotte, who's my least favorite of the 6, and I found even her abilities were useful post-class change. Speaking of, once you get to a certain plot point, you can change your character's classes at the mana stones dotting the world. This will not only bolster their stats, it will give them more ability equip slots, and also expand their spells and special attacks, so you should act on it as soon as you get the opportunity. Every time you'll go to change your class, you'll be given one of 2 options, a light and a dark class. This is not a morality system, but rather, light classes tend to have more team play powers, and dark classes tend to focus purely on the character's strongest stats. There is no wrong way to do these, so customize as you see fit. Once on the overworld, the game is just a joy to play. While I lament the loss of multiplayer native to the original, the overall game handles like an action RPG now. Full-on running, jumping, dodging, attack combos, and aerial attacks are now a part of the core gameplay. On top of all that, the amount of grinding required to level up in the game is drastically reduced from its original. This means the game's overall speed is greatly increased, and things like class changing for the first time before you even enter the ghost ship scenario are more or less a given and less of an Easter egg. See, since you'll dodge attacks manually, the game no longer runs an agility stat, instead simplifying the stats into 5 categories: strength, constitution, spirit, intelligence, and luck. Every time you level up, you'll be awarded a certain number of stat points, which go up as you get into later levels, to place into training trees unique to each character. This will also subsequently unlock new spells, techniques, and passive abilities. Some of these are chain abilities, which any character can equip once they become unlocked, allowing for greater flexibility and customization. And as you class change, more slots for these become available, putting an even greater importance on team's composition. The general format of the game is the same as its original, traveling from towns to dungeons, solving simple puzzles here and there, and traversing the terrain and mostly enemy encounters. The late game segments heavily involve grinding out high-level seed items. And actually, let's touch on that, as the remake has added some quality of life improvements to a lot of things in the game. And this includes things like the little cactus minigame, a hide-and-seek affair where you can find instances of a tiny plant creature who will give you a stamp on a relay card every time you find him, finding him a certain number of times, unlocking additional perks and bonuses. The planter boxes in the ends of the game level up as seed items are grown in them, giving you higher chances at getting better items from each. And on the whole, items are much more common and much easier to manage between your active item ring and item storage. All this taken together makes a game that is much less frustrating and much less RNG reliant. It also means that a single playthrough of the game will likely take about 20 hours or so, which is a bit more honest than the grind-heavy SNES counterpart. But here comes a cool thing. Trials of Mana now includes a New Game Plus mode where character levels, items, money, and progress on things like the little cactus minigame remain with you as you progress. And just like in the original, there's 3 separate in-game segments depending on who your leader is, and the game now has an adjustable difficulty select from the options menu for newcomers and veterans alike. Add in the new achievement system, and a new post-story dungeon area, and a new 4th level class change only accessible after clearing the story, and you'll have a very robust game that took me over 60 hours to 100% clear. And I was all too happy to start up yet another new game file and do it all over again for the sake of the video you are presently watching. Were there things that I didn't like? Sure, but I've pretty much covered that already, chiefly being the absence of a multiplayer mode, which colored my experiences throughout Secret of Mana, which actually worked with the SNES multi-tap, fun fact, and the original Seiken Densetsu 3 playthroughs, which oddly enough did not. This could easily be remedied via netplay since the camera would always be behind the character that you're controlling and so on, but that's just a pipe dream, I imagine. Anyway, I guess some voice lines do come off as stiff, but that's kind of an oh well from me. I don't really see that as a big deal. It's clear that Square Enix nowadays treats the Mana series as a B-list franchise, not giving it the big budget Final Fantasy treatment, but that's not a fault of the game, that's a fault of the company. But at the very least, after 15 years of patiently waiting for it, I finally have an official English release of one of my favorite games of all time. I love it, and you should too. That's the final word on this bit of Snek Sweets. This has been the Mana Snek. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit that like button so I know. For more like this every week, you can hit the subscribe and bell icons too. For more content from me and my Tomo Bros, you can hit us up on the Tomodachi Bros podcast and YouTube mirrors, or our ever-growing collection of social media, all links in the description of every video every time. I hope you enjoyed this suite, and look forward to more obscure reviews, indie excellence, and more to come. Join me here each week for more like this, and I will see you there.